Well, good morning, everyone. It is so good to click through all the boxes and to see your faces. Welcome to our informational and invitational session of Vital Congregations. We've got a great group of people who will talk to you about what it means to say yes to this and what you can expect, and to answer any questions that you may have. Today, we'll have myself, Katie Day, Russ Weekly, Tom Bryson, Carlton Johnson, and Marla Edwards are also here, as well as other folks you may hear from during the Q&A. So I am going to start with a prayer. Let us pray. God of grace and God of glory, we thank you for gathering us as the body of Christ. We ask that you fill this time with wonder, curiosity, knowledge, and clarity. Give us strength to be the disciples who reflect your message of salvation, joy, hope, and love. In Christ our Lord we pray. Amen. During our time together, you won't be able to chat directly to one another, but you will be able to send questions to hosts. And during the Q&A, we encourage you to use the raise your hand feature so that we can respond accordingly. So I just wanted to start, I'm going to share my screen with you all. I just wanted to start with a reminder of what this presbytery has been committed to around health and vitality. It's one of the things that really drew my heart to coming to this presbytery, and something that I think is really powerful. And so just want to remind us sort of how we got here to saying yes to Vital Congregations. So in 2010, we changed our theme. As a presbytery, you kind of went away from the programmatic model as a presbytery and went to a consultants model. And so growing healthy, vital congregations became a mission and a focus. So utilizing Holy Cow consulting and the CAT scan, Shalom team, workshops, resources, committees and commissions, everybody working together hand in hand to make sure that we really focus on what it means to be healthy as the people of God and as congregations proclaiming the gospel. When I came in 2018, I thought it was great. Again, this theme and this emphasis on health, but also at the same time, the denomination was putting forth this Vital Congregations initiative. 2 months on the job, one of our pastors came to me and said, Aisha, why aren't we doing the Vital Congregations initiative? I said, I just got here. I don't even know what that is. What are you talking about? 7 marks, a 2-year commitment? That's nice, but I need a little more time to really make sense of what health and vitality means for the Presbytery of Greater Atlanta. So on a few of our staff retreats, we talked about these 7 marks, and we talked about what would it look like for us to make sense of it for ourselves. And so you guys know how much I love alliteration. So I said, why don't we talk about what it means to flourish? And so we talked about these 4 Ps of being a presbytery committed to prayer, passion, priesthood, and purpose. All of that was influenced by Vital Congregations initiative. We also had the gift of our own Lauren Wright Pittman, who was able to make this beautiful piece of art reflecting that emphasis. In 2019, we expanded our statement of not only growing healthy and vital congregations, but also equipping healthy and innovative leaders, just reminding ourselves that the health of our churches is impacted by the health of our leaders and vice versa. And so again, continuing with the small groups and kind of cohorts that we have, and all the workshops and training, and again, all the work that we're doing together, that just expands this focus and emphasis on what it means to be healthy. In 2020, we learned more within our denomination, this invitation to be a Matthew 25 presbytery. Again, lifting up something that we already said that we were committed to, that matters to us. So in 2020, we looked at what would it mean to be a presbytery that was concerned about building congregational vitality, which we already do, but also dismantling structural racism and eradicating poverty. In 2021, we voted to be a Matthew 25 presbytery. And at the end of 2020, thanks to Phil Brown, He said, Aisha, now's the time. Now's the time for the Presbytery of Greater Atlanta to sign on for the Vital Congregations Initiative. I said, well, I think you're right. I've kind of waited long enough, but it really, again, fit in to all the things we were saying yes to. So we were accepted into this third wave. So that's how we got to this point. So I really am excited that you all are interested, that you are curious. And I think that the invitation for congregations and leaders to participate in VCI is an invitation to a deeper journey and commitment to our collective health and vitality. So I hope that you will continue to remain interested, and I hope that by the end of this session that you will have the information that you need to submit a letter of intent so you can walk alongside us in this 2-year journey. At this time, I'm going to turn the time over to Tom Bryson, who is actually our Vital Congregations captain. I will let him say a little bit more about himself, and he will have a little more to say to us.
Good morning. I'm so glad to be with you from the Central Time Zone, where you already know today's off to a good start. I'm happy to be here as a captain of Vital Congregations Initiative. I started off as part of the writing team many years ago, invited by Catherine Threadgill to help put together some of the initial thoughts around this initiative. And then I've kind of stayed on in different capacities, and I'll let Carlton talk about kind of the reiterations of many different ways that we can help in your process of becoming a Vital Congregations Presbytery. I am serving currently as a pastor in the Birmingham area. We're right outside of town in a place called Vestavia Hills. I'm at Southminster Presbyterian Church currently, and we have used and are using a great deal of the resources that come along with the Vital Congregations Initiative. We are about 6 months into the process of merging with another church. And so we have seen some of the great benefits of Vital Congregations, not only on the national scale of my participation in writing team as captains, but also here in my local congregation, finding ways for us to use some of the language of the marks of vitality. So in just a moment, I'm going to share with you my screen, and we will talk about, there we go. My time today with you is to help clarify what Vital Congregations Initiative is and is not. And so to do that, I want to make sure that we go through some of the language that we've used over the several years of this program through the different phases that have gone before you, which have been really helpful in helping us craft and sharpen even better many of the resources that will be available to you in the third wave. As you can see, here is our vision statement that we were tasked with from the very beginning, to join with the work of the Holy Spirit to help equip and nurture and support church leaders as they work in their congregations, as they renew and recover and live more fully into the faithful discipleship. But the purpose of Vital Congregations is to walk alongside. I'm going to go a little more deeply in just a moment, but we are not a consultant-based model for working with congregations. That was part of some of the early discussions of how this would manifest, and I'll show you in a moment why we decided to go away from that particular model. But we're here to help you deepen your relationship with Christ. We think we've got a pretty good idea of what that might look like in the life of the congregation. These 7 marks of vitality that we'll go through, we do believe that those 7 marks are strengths of churches who are alive, not only to their members, but in their community, to their staff, and fully immersed into what God is doing in their midst. So I do also want to say here at the beginning that this whole slideshow, it will be available to you. I've sent it in and you should have a copy of it if you would like. So what is Vital Congregations Initiative? We are hopeful through the mission agency and mid-council leaders that we can help pastors and leaders in the congregations to come together as God's people, to return to prayer and faithfulness to God, inspire openness, honestly assess, discern, and act. That's very important. Resources to help provide you the initial toolkit and other resources that come with Bible studies, sermon helps, and also just access to people who've done this before. Practice missional evangelism and faith discipleship, and equip Vital Congregations with the praxis of sustainability, ongoing assessments. You'll see at the end of the first year, you'll take an assessment to kind of see where you're going as a congregation, and to also be able to not only tell your stories, but to hold on to those and develop what your new story will look like as you move forward as a Vital Congregation. Here is a very good, sometimes the best way to articulate something is to say what it is not. This is not a cookie cutter universal program. We're not saying that we're going to give you every single piece of wording that you are going to take into your congregation. And if you follow steps 1 through 99, the 100th step will be a vital church. That's really not how this is going to work. There's no immediate fix. We are not guaranteeing that every congregation will look the same in its revitalization. And we're not attempting to tell PCUSA churches what they have to do. We wanted to make sure that was the far from what our instincts were as a team putting this together. We're not telling congregations what they have to do. If a certain mark or a certain practice does not work for your local congregation, then it's something you can move through quickly. But you may find that those are the things really that you ought to pay attention to. This is not a survival guide for your building. It's not a survival guide for your membership numbers. This is much more broad than that. We're not also here to just tell you that you can change 1 or 2 little things in the bulletin each week, and all of a sudden your church is just fantastic and alive. We don't have those kind of easy fixes, and we're also not. We're not a repository for nostalgia, or not telling you that the easy fix is to call the next pastor. So with that in mind, I want to move us into how we got here. Very early on in the process, we knew that there was going to have to be some hard conversations in churches, and we wanted to be able to equip them with the best tools we possibly could. In some of our training and some of our discussions early on with appreciative inquiry, especially, we came to the conclusion that this would be an adaptive process. We at Vital Congregations could not provide technical support. What's the difference? If the pipes burst in the ladies' bathroom this morning here at Southminster Presbyterian Church, I'm not going to go ask everybody in the hallway to tell me their story. Tell me your story and your practice of using the bathroom. No, I'm going to call a plumber. I'm going to call an expert, someone who has the technical advice, the technical know-how of how to fix this problem. There are many technical problems in the lives of churches. That is true. We're not saying it's not, but we're saying that vitality in the life of the church is almost always an adaptive process. Who owns the who owns and who is a stakeholder in the life of a community, in the life of the church? We do together. We work alongside by the power of the Holy Spirit. We feel like the adaptive process is so much more than the technical resources that we could give. We chose this as a primary way to move forward in how we wrote the curriculum, how we put together the resource kits, and you will see this over and over again, that there is not a technical solution to anything that we are providing for you in your congregation. These are all practices. These are all the good hard work. This is the capturing of stories. This is the important discipline of listening and interpretation. So what does that look like? Well, a couple years ago, I was in a meeting very much like this, except we were all in person, of course. And I was listening to an elder in the church who had previously in another life been a nurse. And she said, this is all brand new to me. As a nurse, I was taught to find where someone is bleeding, to identify the problem, to see what was needed in a situation. And she said, I've just realized that I do that over and over again throughout all the things that happen in my life. And I think that's probably true, that deficit-based change might be really our go-to understanding of how to affect change. And I think far too often, even in my life, I fall into the trappings of trying to affect change, even in the life of the church, through a deficit-based approach. That is to identify the problem. What's the problem? We don't have enough money. We don't have enough people. We don't have enough space. We do that in church all the time, right? We identify what the problem is because the problem tells us how to fix how to find a solution. So deficit-based change is identifying the problem. Why is that the problem? How can we fix it? All of a sudden, problem solved. Now, I would say that if the deficit-based approach worked in the life of the church, we would already have solved all the problems that the church ever faced. But I'm going to offer a different way forward for us as we talk about vital congregations. This is the constructionist-based model. This is an idea of conversation with stakeholders in the life of the church to discover what is best. If we give our focus to what is best in the church, we think that that's what will appreciate, what will grow, what will help us sustain the congregations. So this is a model that has birthed what we call the 4 Ds: discovery, dream, design, destiny, or sometimes you see do. This is putting it into action. And so these are the 4 Ds of appreciative inquiry. And if you want to, at some point, go into a little more training of appreciative inquiry, there is no shortage of ways that you can do that. We use this model for vital congregations, but you can also find wonderful resources for appreciative inquiry online. So I encourage you to go out and find that and to sharpen your tools as you move forward with the Vital Congregations Initiative. So what does that look like? Well, eventually they decided there needed to be a 5th D. So the very first D is define. This is the affirmative topic. This is the thing that we want to enhance, to be better, to grow as it is. So as far as we're concerned, we have discovered the 5th D that we would like for you to discover, dream, design, deliver, do, or destiny there at the end for your congregations. And we have made that very first D, that definition of vital congregations, these 7 marks. This was the work of a great many people in our denomination to sit down to look at what is best about congregations when they are fully alive. This is not to say this is the definitive list. This is certainly not handed down to us on a golden tablet from God. This is completely part of our discernment into what it is that we think looks best about congregations when they are fully alive and being who they are in their community. And so I offer you these, and we're going to go through them all as just an introductory session for those of you who have not seen these before. Lifelong discipleship formation. Intentional, authentic evangelism. Outward incarnational focus. Empower servant leadership. Spirit-inspired worship. Caring relationships. And ecclesial health. Let's take these one by one. And when we talk about lifelong discipleship, as we are working together as the church, we're not talking about this idea of Christian piety as it's sometimes just a part of our natural DNA that we're just going to be good, pious, as soon as we feel the water of baptism upon our head. It is not about moral teachings. And it's not finding the latest, the greatest, the flashiest program to offer to your congregation. That's not what we're talking about here. Those might be technical solutions. We're taking the deeper dive into this, and you will find resources for a program to place lifelong discipleship as the idea of a cradle to grave life. Faith-seeking understanding, that is the idea of theology and practice, seeking God's word and what it might look like in our life. Discipleship awakened and engaged in our communities and the practice in our pews, forming and strengthening our community through the things that we do as disciples. Our second mark is intentional, authentic evangelism. Now, as you could probably guess, all of us on the writing team jumped at the chance to write about evangelism because it's so easy and such a topic that we're so comfortable with as Presbyterians. This seems to be kind of one of the stickier ones, but we think that we've got something really good to offer here. It is not about that big kind of movement of the Jesus freaks. We're not going to buy into that kind of model. And it's not about saying one thing and doing something else with our lives. And it is certainly, Presbyterians, I know this is hard to believe, but it is not about forming another committee. Although you might feel the need to form another committee. What it is about being intentional of sharing who we are, what it is we believe, what it is we find valuable about our faith and our life in Christ. It is about being truly authentic, about showing Christ, kind of digging through some of that flashiness. And we believe it is also about being relational, of being not only present, but doing something good in our community. That leads us into the outward incarnational focus, the third mark. It is not about institutional survival. How many times have we been in those conversations where we kind of collapse in on ourselves and say, we've got to keep the church open, or we've got to keep this program going? That is not what incarnational focus is about. We're not about just close communities. We're not simply about assimilating others into who we are. And it's certainly not about exclusion. Well, what it does is it leads us outward into exploring, being aware, and focusing beyond who we are as our individual congregations. It is those relationships with those who are similar to us that we can find synergies and partnerships. It is about missional focus. But I think more than anything else, it is meeting Christ where Christ is already at work. It is finding those places around us and discovering what it is God is already at work doing. Next, we come to empower servant leadership. This is not the pastor's job, only the pastor's job. This is not about finding one good leader and leaving that person until Jesus comes. This is not about hiring the young, energetic go-getter. What it is, it's identifying spiritual gifts. This comes through storytelling and sharing and being vulnerable in a lot of ways. Sometimes we don't immediately see these gifts in ourselves, but we can also help empower others to see that gift. That all voices are necessary. All people are necessary. Every one of us has something within us, the spark, the gift of the Spirit, to help be a leader in a certain portion or a certain gift of the church. It's about encouraging and nurturing those gifts as we move along in the life of the church. Spirit-inspired worship. This is not a self-gratifying worship, and it's not about just going through the motions, forgetting why we're going through the motions, and possibly one of the ones we spent the most time on is the understanding and the world we live in of instant gratification. We have tendencies all around us to fall into the trappings of entertainment and consumer models. And so what we do is we push back against that. Obviously, we see a spirit-inspired worship as being about God, coming to this holy encounter in this holy place of helping others to see what it is God is doing all around them. Active participation, inviting others who have not participated into the life of worship to be involved in that and to see that relational challenge to all of us as what we understand as the Trinity, as the relationship in God's self. Challenging, convicting, transforming worship practices, worship practices of the church. Just because we've done it one way for a few years doesn't mean that that's the way it always has to be. Challenging those expectations of why we're doing what it is we do. Caring relationships. We are not a social club. We do not charge dues to be able to hang out with your friends. We need to drop those masks and those things that hide us away from each other, those walls that we build. We also need to challenge hypocrisy when we see it. These are things that we need to keep each other accountable. These relationships are not caring if we're not holding one another to a higher standard together. But it's also doesn't fall into the trappings of judgment toward one another. We see the caring relationship working in love. What it is, it's sharing our stories and asking for help. This is a wonderful opportunity to welcome and show hospitality. It is about confronting conflict and working toward reconciliation with one another. This is a great opportunity for us to explore what it is to be peacemakers and bridge builders. And number 7, ecclesial health. A vital congregation, we do not believe has unhealthy dysfunction as part of its practice in the life of the church. A toxic environment, or here's what might be an easier thing to kind of get into the conversation is looking at your space. You know, the practice of good ecclesial health is also about the gifts that we have around us as our space, our buildings. What is it that is obsolete, that we're not using anymore, that is not finding life and vitality? Ecclesial health is gaining clarity in mission, keeping core values in ministry, being responsible in our stewardship of these gifts, nurturing and supporting our leaders, and knowing our why and our how we are the church together. And so there you are. You've now been introduced to the 7 marks of vitality as we have explored and added as many resources as we possibly can through the beta test and the first 2 phases. We have continued to add more and more resources, and we look forward to being sharper with you. So there is the stop share. There we go. I don't know, is now an appropriate time to ask for questions, or are we doing that a little bit later on?
Tom, we're going to do that a little bit later on, but I just want to thank you so much for being here with us, for walking us through that. Thank you for all the ways you've been invested in this and continue to cheer us on. So we're so thankful to have you as our captain. Thank you so much. At this time, I'm going to call on Katie Day, who has actually had some experience with vital congregations in her former presbytery, and she's going to talk about what it means to say yes to VCI. So I yield our time to Katie Day.
Well, hey, y'all. Good morning. I am glad to be with you this morning. And as Aisha shared, I have some experience as a participant going through the Vital Congregations Initiative. I'm Katie Day. I am the newest pastor up at Pleasant Hill Presbyterian in Duluth, and I have been here for a little over a year. And prior to that, I served a congregation in California in the Presbytery of San Jose. And we were a pilot presbytery for the Vital Congregations Initiative. And when I first heard about the opportunity at an informational session, much like this, it just sounded like such a great thing to participate in. And we were hearing about it as a pilot presbytery with the idea that over the next years, the future, this would be offered as an opportunity for congregations all over the country. And so when I saw a note from Aisha about the Presbytery of Greater Atlanta jumping into this process, I was really excited to share my experience and to see how I could be involved. So I will be one of your facilitators should you say yes to this invitation to participate in this initiative. And I wanted to share a little bit about my process thinking through for my former congregation when offered this same opportunity to participate in VCI. One of the questions that came up for me was, well, aren't we already vital? We feel pretty vital to me, that congregation that I was serving, and a lot of other folks in our presbytery had the same idea. Aren't we? We're already vital. But I started thinking about the scriptural witness and what God does and how God does it. And what I see in the Bible is that God doesn't leave good things alone. God doesn't make something vital and then leave it. God continues to add God continues to do new things and to add vitality in new ways and to revitalize God's people, God's church, God's mission in the world. And so God calls us into new ways of being vital every day, I believe. And one of the ways that God does that is by moving us into community and offering us ways to do things together. And so this opportunity to do this together as a presbytery, I believe is very worthwhile. And I want to tell you exactly what it, I'm not going to say exactly. I'm going to tell you what it might look like were you to say yes. So let's see, I think Miranda has some slides. Perfect. So if you were to say yes, what would it look like? This was the big question that I had back a few years ago when I was doing this. This is a 2-year commitment. And it's split into year 1 is all about being relational. It's about assessing who we are as congregations, as a presbytery. It's about being intentionally connected to one another. And then year 2, which I'll talk about in a moment, is all about being incarnational. How do we live into what God is doing in our midst? So what you have on this slide are some of the objectives for year 1. And this is straight out of VCI's materials. The focus of year 1 is about building intentional relationships, getting people connected in the presbytery, getting pastors in relationships with one another, getting leaders of congregation, elders, deacons in relationship with one another, and focusing on relationships within individual congregations as well. It's about engaging in confessional assessment, really looking at who we are, who we have been, and then faithfully discerning where God is going to lead us forward. And we do that in a really intentional way with this life story process that I'll share in a moment. Looking at your history, telling the story of your congregation, telling the story of our presbytery, and discerning who you are now as with an eye moving forward. And looking partly not just within your walls, but outside of the walls of your congregation, and doing a neighborhood exegesis or a neighborhood analysis to see really where are you located, physically, what kind of community are you in, getting to know the needs of your neighbors. And the way that we do this is with those 7 marks as a common grammar for these conversations, so that when we talk about spirit-inspired worship, or we talk about outward incarnational focus, that we know what we're saying. We're all on the same page, and I think those marks are a really helpful thing. Let me see the next slide, please. So this is what the first year it really entails in this initiative. It starts off with a period of planning, with a time for your session, your staff, to start figuring out what this looks like within the context of your own church, setting your calendar. There's a couple different tracks that are possible. You can start this on a calendar year starting in January. You could also start it on a program year, and the VCI materials offer options for both tracks. So there's 2 months estimated planning time. During that time, the session is encouraged to do the neighborhood analysis. And there's materials for that, there's resources, really everything you need. Like Tom said, it's not going to give you every word that you will say to your congregation or to your session, but it'll really give you the framework and the outline of what you need to do. And then things get kicked off. You're encouraged to have an event, a kickoff event for your congregation. And the first work that you will do all together as a congregation is a 7-week study on the 7 marks. And in the VCI materials, there's a Bible study to do. You can do that as a church-wide study. You can disseminate that out to your various classes and Bible studies to do on their own, or you can do it all together. There's sermon prompts to do a sermon series in worship, all kinds of resources to engage over 7 weeks, these 7 marks. And then after that, once you've gotten on the same page, you've built your shared grammar, there is the checking our marks assessment time. So we know what the marks are. This is when we look at who we are as a congregation and how do we match up against these marks? What are we really good at? What are we really not so good at? What has been really strong in our past? What is strong in our present? And the way that you'll do that is by going through a Telling Our Story series of activities designed to look at your history, to celebrate your history, as well as provide some opportunities for confession for the pieces of your history that may need that. There is a survey that is kind of the cornerstone of this assessment piece. It's a congregation-wide survey. You'll have the opportunity to do that in the context of a worship service. And I have to tell you, when I first heard this, when I was going through this with my congregation in California, I was like, do a survey in the middle of worship? That sounds weird. But the materials and the structure and the plan for that moment made it not weird. Because we've been talking about it and building to it. And it was a moment of responding to the word. And it felt right to do that in worship. And the survey is scored it's through there's an official name for it. Tom Bryson will know the name of it. I don't have it. The United States something. It's an official organization will score the survey for us. It's created by them. It's not me sitting at the Presbytery office like going through all of your surveys. So know that. So you'll do that in worship and then send that off to be scored. And then the next part is this revitalization assessment where you receive your scores back. You will have done also as part of the previous months, the neighborhood analysis with your whole congregation, or those who are willing and able to participate. And so you'll have all of these results in hand. And this is when your time to look at all of these results and see what you have in front of you, and where you think God might be leading you. So that's that middle 3 months. And then for the final 2 months of the first year, we have a Show Your Marks campaign. And this is a time where you work with your session to really pull your story together, to present it to the presbytery, to share with the presbytery, to share with the denomination. These will become, these stories, these reports will become ideally the new benchmark for what it means to be a vital congregation. So rather than just holding up membership numbers or budget numbers or building, who's building more buildings and buying more land and starting new, it will be able to, as a denomination, point to these marks of vitality and where these stories of vitality in congregations can be really illustrated in these reports, these campaigns. So that's year one. Year one, like I said, is really all about this assessment, getting to know who you've been and who you are now. The other piece of year one that you'll hear about in a little bit from Russ is that during that time, there are cohorts at the presbytery level that pastors will participate in. And I think we're hoping to have one where elders and deacons will be able to participate in, where you will be meeting over the course of that year, building relationships with one another, diving deeper into these marks, into this understanding of what it means to be a vital congregation, and really connecting with one another. And I have to tell you, the cohort that I was able to participate in California was, it was the best part of this process for me, honestly. We built really wonderful relationships and trust, and were able to help one another as pastors through this year of working through this initiative, this first year of working through this initiative. And then we're moving into year two when the pandemic hit. So I didn't get to finish out year two. So let me move on to year two so that you know what that's about. Year two of this process is all about being incarnational, about living into what vitality is. It's about re-envisioning how we're called to be church, and an openness to seeing how God is at work, and courage to follow God leading you into new things. And it's about transformation, revitalization in 3 actions. And these are words, I think, came out of a conversation within our Presbytery planning team. I don't know if these came from you, Aisha. The 3 R words are not from VCI, but they capture the 3 actions, I think, from VCI really well. One of the 3 actions is revisioning. It's basically revitalizing by reforming and always by being reformed and always being reformed. Utilizing the 7 marks. What new thing are we being called into? And like Tom said, it's not about tweaking a couple of things in the bulletin and calling it a day. This is the time for bold action, to be open to what the Spirit is calling you to do within your congregation. The second action of this year two is reconfiguring, and that would be revitalizing by clustering of congregations or ministries into new communities of worship, new communities of shared ministry and mission. So reconfiguring what it might look like to be church. And then the third action is resurrection. It's revitalizing by completely reimagining church in grace and gratitude and the legacy of a congregation. And that might look like living new life as a new worshiping community, or learning to thrive without a building holding you down, anchoring you to one particular place in time. So that's a total reimagining of what a congregation might look like in that moment. Giving thanks for what has gone before and stepping into a moment of resurrection. So we'll see what year two looks like on a calendar basis. Let's see that next slide. Yeah. So it again starts off with a month of planning time, and this is where this again would be a time for like a session retreat for the staff and for the officers to really look at setting the framework for this over the next year with the congregation. And then again, the kickoff piece for year two is once more a 7-week study on the 7 marks with a different focus this time, a focus on how a congregation might be called to implement these marks in a new way, or to change based on what we learned about ourselves in the 7 marks assessment of that first year. How might we look at these in a new way? That's this new 7 weeks. And then you have 2 months of plotting the course to create an action plan. And this is the heavy work of discernment and forward momentum around those 3 actions. Where are you being called? We've assessed, we've evaluated, we did all of that work. And now of those three actions of revisioning, of reconfiguring, of resurrection, where is your congregation being called and how? This is the how. What will this look like? And while there are tools available for you in the VCI materials for this process, we can't tell you how to do this because it will be unique to each congregation as you individually discern what this looks like for yourself. This is the new thing that God will be calling your congregation into. And then you have a week of prayer, a congregation-wide week of prayer to get focused on the new initiative that your congregation is about to start. And then you have 6 months of living into what you have, what the course you have plotted, to use that language. You have 6 months changing our marks. This is where you will be walking with your congregation through your action plans that you've created, through moving within these three actions of revisioning and reconfiguring and resurrection. And this is where you will be supported. Honestly, you'll be supported throughout this entire process by your Presbytery folks, by me as one of your facilitators. But this is where you really will be living into that for these 6 months. And then you will end that year, that second year, with an assessment to see how you're doing. 6 months into it, how is it going? How has the process been? What goals do you have moving forward? How do you kind of wrap up this time period of 2 years that you've invested in this initiative as a congregation and with your presbytery? How would you wrap that up and celebrate the work that is done and where God is moving you forward? And that's how it ends. So those are your 2 years, and you have you'll receive when you say yes. You'll receive the book that has all of the things in it. You will have all of the details, and you will never be alone. You'll have my support. You'll have the support of your presbytery leadership, and it's exciting to go through this together. And I can say that having gone through it once before, and I'm really looking forward to going through it again with my own congregation as well as supporting you all. So thanks, y'all.
Katie, thank you so much for your enthusiasm, for having had the experience. We didn't know that when you were coming into this presbytery. So just another confirmation that this was just a great season. At this time, I'm going to invite our moderator, Russ Weekly, a pastor of Good Shepherd, to just talk a little bit more about what we can expect in terms of resources.
Thank you, Aisha. Good morning, everyone. As Aisha said, I am currently serving as the moderator of the Presbytery, which is part of what gets me invited here. It is, of course, a daunting presentation after the man who literally wrote the book, and Katie, who has been there, done that, and will guide us on the journey. And I come to you simply as a pastor interested in being involved. We came to Vital Congregations Initiative and our letter of intent as a result of being a Matthew 25 church in 2019, doing a lot of web searching on that first initiative, which is being a vital congregation, and then saying, hey, there's a whole lot more here than we know what to do with. Let's figure it out. So that's how we've come to the table. We are excited to be here with you. And the first mark that I want to share with you today is empowering other leadership. So Miranda, would you please turn on the slides? This is the gift that keeps on giving, because you have people in your congregation who know more about how to do it right than you do. We just need to make sure we're using those gifts. Next slide, please. Aisha has asked me to share with you today about ways that we can participate. And this is if you say yes, or even if you haven't said yes or decide to hold off a while, one of the ways that you can continue to learn more about what's happening with VCI is through our stated Presbytery meetings. I've given you the dates here along with which of the marks will be covered, but our worship and planning committee is looking at what's going to be highlighted both through the sermon content and through the preachers that are, or the speakers that are invited to present the sermon, as well as the rest of the framing and formation. So if you don't happen to be elected as a commissioner, you can always come as a guest. If you're not available on those dates, you also see the link here where you can go back and pull it off of the website to see the missed meetings. Next slide, please. One of the other things the Presbytery will be doing is presenting town hall gatherings. Again, you see the month and the year, the specific dates are still to be determined. But these are going to be about an hour long, and it's intended to be a focused conversation around each of these marks that, unlike today, will provide more of a back and forth throughout the content. So as we go through the process, we can figure out more of what does it look like in each of these areas. So we're excited to be able to offer those as well. Next slide, please. This really is one of the parts that I'm looking forward to most, in part because Katie talked about how powerful it was, but also because it's one of the ways that our presbytery has continued to try and nurture the pastors and support leaders as part of our being authentic to our mission statement. But this is 25 sessions over the course of the 2 years that are going to be about an hour apiece. Katie said in their previous format, they set it up so that you could maybe include a lunch afterwards and have the informal conversation continue. But it really takes us from looking at Scripture and from Scripture into the realities of where we are and how we serve, and then what the Holy Spirit is guiding us to do beyond that. So I think there's going to be a lot of great growth there. You'll see at the bottom of the slide just an invitation to chase down more resources there out of the pastor's workbook. Next slide, please. There are also, as has been alluded to, resources for Christian education curriculum with a 7-week study of how to introduce this to your church. And that curriculum is built on the model of opening with prayer, offering Scripture. You've got the commentary components of it, which provide you some background on the Scripture, great reflection questions, and then, of course, as you see, you've got the supplemental resources and additional videos. One of the things that makes this unique, though, is it's intended to be an across-the-board curriculum. So you have different practices for children, youth, younger adults, and seasoned adults, as well as engagement opportunities. So it's not just what are you doing in that particular lesson time, but what are you doing when the meeting's over? How are you living it out in the world? So that's an exciting component to me as well. Next slide, please. When we talk about preaching and worship, there are, of course, a 7-week series of preaching that is provided. You'll see 7 marks of vital congregations is a section within the pastor's workbook. Within that, you find a lot of scriptures to choose from based on what kind of fits your overall preaching theme, where the congregation happens to be, and you can build your service from there. But there are specifically 2 intentional services written into the material that give you a full service. And the first one is a service of repentance and reconciliation. The final one, of course, is a service of celebration and commitment. And in that service of repentance and reconciliation, it's designed to help us realize we haven't been all that God has called us to be. We can do this more effectively, more efficiently, more wholly if we will but give it back to God. Next slide, please. Katie and Tom already made reference to this, so I'll just go over this briefly, but the assessment tools that are within the workbook, one is telling our story. It's a church history from the congregation, so you're mapping it out. It's going to be a wonderful evening I'm looking forward to at Good Shepherd. The next, of course, is the Vital Congregations survey that Katie alluded to. What really caught my attention, though, folks, is the neighborhood exegesis experience. Because as we were looking as a congregation, as a Matthew 25 congregation, how do we get to know our neighbors? This answers that question. So if you've been struggling with that question like we have at Good Shepherd, here's that wonderful resource, well written, well crafted, to say, here's an idea on how to go and do it. Next, please. Okay, I thought these were going to be back to Katie's. This is just a quick overview of the index of the pastor's workbook. I had put these in here simply so you all would have it as references when you get the slide deck, because it's a lot of information to try and process all at once. And I will go ahead and conclude that as the slides. Thank you, Miranda, and give it back to Aisha.
Russ, thank you so much. I just have to say that while we were trying to process whether churches needed to apply or our presbytery, Good Shepherd was first in line to say that they were going to participate in the VCI. So Russ, I just thank you for your enthusiasm and just your excitement around this and for presenting today. I also just want to say, I'm going to ask Chip to pin the people so that you can see together who will be walking alongside of you during this process. I'm so excited that we have our own Carlton Johnson, who is in leadership with Vital Congregations with the Louisville office, and Marla Edwards. We give thanks for you. You feel we can unmute them, I believe, if that is okay. We're so thankful that you're here. So they are cheering us on. We meet with quarterly sessions as we make sure that we are in line as we're preparing for you all to come on board with this. So Katie Day will be a facilitator, as well as Ken Whitehurst will also be a facilitator, and he will be pinned momentarily. As you know, Tom Bryson is our VCI captain and cheerleader and in it and knows what this has been like. And also your presbytery staff, we are really gifted that there are some presbyteries that do not have a consultants model. And so not only do you have consultants, members of COM, facilitators, moderator, I mean, you just have, so I would also pin Russ because he's an honorary cheerleader in all of this. He might not have facilitator title, but he's facilitator-esque. So I just want to make sure that he is seen, and Ken as well. So this is the team, again, as well as our staff and those who work behind the scenes that really want to walk alongside you. I just think we're really ripe for this, for our churches, for where we are, especially living in and through a pandemic and really asking the questions of who God is calling us to be as the church in the 21st century. So at this time, I just want to open it up for questions, curiosity, anything that we can offer clarity to. And I'm going to ask the folks who are pinned if they will unmute so that if I don't have the answer, maybe someone else will. So at this time, if you have any questions, and while we're waiting for questions to come in, if Carlton and Marla would like to say a few words to those gathered here, I yield that as well.
Well, first and foremost, good morning, everyone. I am going to say if there's ever been a invitational meeting, Presbytery meeting, where I am without words, this is that one. Presbytery of Greater Atlanta, you're always grand on the scale, right? It's just grand. And so I also want to say, so Marla and I have been talking during your meeting, sorry. But the thing that we've been talking about is like, what do they need us for? Katie and Russ, you all have sliced, diced, chopped, and everything, the manuals and everything beyond our wildest imaginations. We're sitting up here going, well, we can take the rest of 2022 off. But we say that in jest to say that, of course, we're here for you, facilitators and Presbytery office, and as much as you need us. Certainly, congregations, fire away with your questions. We realize, as Tom Bryson did such a brilliant job this morning in presenting, that every congregation and every community is different. I mean, really, really, really unique. And we don't claim to know your congregations. We don't claim to know your communities. We don't even claim to know your presbytery. And I'm a part of Greater Atlanta Presbytery, and I just don't claim that. So we open it up to say whatever you need in order to embrace this fully, to identify with your congregation and your community. Get to work and let these folks know what questions and needs you have, and we will respond to them accordingly. I'll shut up because I can talk all day. Marla, anything you'd like to share?
I just ditto everything that Carlton has said. I'm saying, Katie, what? What? This has been great. Send us your slides. You all are a model presbytery. I must say, a model presbytery. You are setting the bar high, and the standard is right there. Aisha, I give kudos to you. You're doing a fantastic job as the leader. You have laid the foundation, and we are truly proud.
We thank you both for your encouragement, because we had a lot of questions in the lead up, but we're really standing on the shoulders of those who visioned before us to say health and vitality really matters in the life of our churches and our leaders. We do have a question, and so I'm going to ask Chip to offer that.
Yes, someone has asked, how soon does PGA need to know if a church will participate?
By December 15th, in the initial invitational letter that I put out. If you all, it doesn't have to be a long letter, 2 paragraphs. We just want to know that that you have the intent, and that it's, again, that it's not just the pastor or one elder or a person on the evangelism team that thinks this is great, but that some thought has been given into what it means to say yes, and that the pastoral leadership, as well as the officers and the congregation, will commit to it. So if you could have, by email is fine. And I am ep@atlpcusa.org. So if you could just shoot me an email or a letter, preferably electronic in this day and age, as you know, our offices are closed to the public. And so it'd be great if you could do it that way. But if you mail it in, just let me know and we'll get it as well.
Okay, I have another question.
Sure.
Is there a financial commitment for participating churches?
I'm going to take a stab at this. My understanding, Carlton and Marla, that the physical books, the physical pastor's workbook, that has a cost attached to it. And but all of the things that we're showing you are also available in PDF. Did I do it?
You did it.
All right.
That's exactly right. That is it.
As someone who is a paper person as well as a Kindle person, I do think pastors, you will probably want to get a physical book, as well as having the PDFs available for how you utilize resources with your leadership.
Okay, I've got a couple more. How can BCI apply to an immigrant church not speaking English?
So Carlton, so far, it is only translated in Spanish, correct?
Correct. It's currently only translated in Spanish. We are working on the Korean translation in 2022.
I would hope that, go ahead, Carlton, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, however, as we have already shared, we do a quarterly gathering with the facilitators and presbytery leadership, and we can certainly, I guess you could say more quickly, have those presentations, which are sort of a quarter by quarter walk through the workbook. We can certainly have those translated and shared more agilely. So, excuse me, though the full manual won't be complete until later in 2022. Any church that wants to begin, we can have those presentations, which can then be shared, translated as we go.
I will ask a follow-up. Just this congregation is not English, Spanish, or Korean. So any sort of advice for that?
So I would have to know more about the congregation's language needs and check with Global Language Services here in the offices in Louisville. I do know that they have a lot of resources available to them. On the one end, the other end has to do with the I guess you can say more or less how much of it the presbytery and or the larger church would need. So if you can offline, we can talk about a little more about the needs of that particular congregation.
Okay, I'll put you in touch with this person.
Okay.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Can the US CVS survey be distributed electronically to the congregation?
Yes. In fact, that's sort of the primary mode at this point, simply because of the pandemic. So much like Katie shared, though, it's still highly recommended that it's done in a context where everyone's together. So if it can be shared during an online morning worship, or even if the congregation is gathering in person, perhaps it can be done on smartphones and or iPads, but it's still best to try to do it when folks are together. But yes, it's available electronically.
Are the Bible study pieces also free? I would assume that would be yes in the PDF format, but no in the hard copy.
We provide it digitally to the presbytery, those that we have. So let me answer this in a couple of ways. We can provide what we have digitally to the presbytery. And likewise, it can be shared with the congregations digitally, and whichever tools they want to use to print it or share it with the congregation member. That's number one. Number two, we don't want to limit what the creativity and imagination of the presbytery and the congregations. In other words, as you go and as you know your communities, your churches, once you get more in tune, more accustomed to this language and to these marks, we invite you to expand and create your own Bible studies. We're great teachers in this denomination. We have amazing pastors who we want to expand. If we send you one lesson around spirit-inspired worship, create 2 or 3 more, and not only share them among your other congregations, but share them with your presbytery leaders who can share them with us. But the answer to the original question is yes, we can share some of what we have with you all. And I'm sorry, let me wrap that question up to say that some were created by our team, and some, in fact, came from other congregations.
And we, just as a follow-up, we do have the capacity. We will be adding another page to our website so that people will be able to have access to some of these resources. So that is also in the works.
Ready for another one?
Yeah.
How has VCI been experienced by smaller congregations with a part-time temporary pastor with overextended session and few other leaders willing and able to step up?
I am definitely passing that on to Tom and Carlton and Katie and Marla.
I'm going to let Tom take a stab at this because I'm always with the yeses. But Tom, go ahead and see what you got there.
So we had that in mind. I grew up in that church. But that church you were just describing, that was the church I grew up in middle of nowhere, Mississippi. So when I was writing some of the resources, we wanted to make sure that we held the leader's hand. We didn't tell them what to do, what to say, but we held their hand because we know that there are congregations that are stretched very thin. Now, I'm going to tell you, the bulk of this was written before the pandemic. We have edited a bit since the pandemic. We've added other things since the pandemic. But some of that does need translating. And I understand the particular stress that the pandemic has placed on all of us. So, you know, when I was writing, this very small, Russ, I think, gave me a lot of credit there. The very small parts that I was writing of this curriculum, I held my hometown congregation in mind. That these are the people who want to come, not simply just to churn away at another task, but to feel renewed in what they're doing. And so I hope that came across in the writing that was done, that we held in a particular way those congregations and those leaders in our hands as we were putting this together. Does that help?
I hope so. I think I'm also thankful for the cohort model, where the stuff that you might not be able to make sense of by yourself or just in your local congregation, that you can think outside of the box. I'm thankful for Ken Whitehurst, who is serving one of our smaller churches and will be able to give some insight to that as well. So I think part of it is knowing that we are in this together and trying to make sense of what that means in each context together.
Can I add just one other thing? It's a question that didn't get asked, but it ultimately gets asked. And it has to do with a congregation that does not have a pastor, or does not have assigned leadership. We have found that the initiative can be a great tool, not necessarily for calling, as we said in the presentation, calling the young energetic pastor, but for the congregation to really have a framework for who they are, to build their identity for who they are in advance of the pastor. Because we know, all of us, that typically, whether we're talking about our call as a pastor or you having called pastors to our congregations, that if we don't have an identity, it makes it really hard for the new pastor to come in and try to create an identity for the congregation. More importantly, as a new pastor, we don't always come in with, the great plan to make the church great. That's what, we do to pastors, unfortunately, is come make us alive again. But this initiative gives just a great way of building a narrative, building a story for the congregation to navigate their way into who they are and who they want to be in their call for new pastors and or their leadership in the time without a pastor. So I just want that question wasn't asked, but it gets asked often, and I wanted to answer it in advance.
And again, I'm thankful that Joy Fisher and I have been in conversation about if there are deacons and elders that sign up, that she will be one of the leaders for that cohort as well. So that's another way to really fan the flame on that. Chip, do we have more questions?
I gave a partial answer to this question, but I'll ask another part to you. Someone says, related to the translation issue, could PGA offer grants that could be used to pay translators to work with churches, or would there be a copyright issue? My part of the answer was, if someone wanted to fund those grants, I'm sure we could make them. And that's just from where I sit as director of operations. But I would ask you, would there be any copyright issues with doing something like that?
So the question to us is, would there be a copyright issue?
Right, with working with translators in churches.
Okay, I'm going to answer that as I'm pretty sure there would not be, but let me just quadruple check that, but I'm pretty sure there would not be.
Yeah, I would like to very much work with the global translation services of the denomination. Mm-hmm. And if there was a cost associated with that, I definitely think there's some possibility of support on our end to do that.
One caveat to that, Carlton.
Yes.
Early on in one of the very first Presbytery, I worked with Northwest Coast up in Seattle in the very first phase. They had translators in their presbytery that were helping put things in Korean, and it was tremendous help. The one thing that we kind of ran into a little bit is just what the intent is. As long as we trust the congregation to hold that, there was some at least thought that some of the material might end up being republished or repackaged, and so we just want to, you know, we're trusting you, you're trusting us, and so if there is some of that translation that's going on, we're hopeful that you will be respectful of those who put in a lot of the hard work on that. So, but that's the only caveat to what you said.
Excellent. Thank you.
I have it's a comment, but I'll see if it relates back to the issue of the survey. It says if you only focus the survey on the core group of folks who are together, you may miss some very important and helpful feedback. I don't know if anyone wants to offer a comment to that.
Can you on both and?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it should go to everybody.
That's right.
Everybody.
That's right.
Even if folks who can't gather in person, everybody should have that opportunity.
Okay. Those are the questions that I have received so far.
All right. Well, we have 7 minutes left, and I always like when I get out of class early or have appreciated. Our hope today is that you all know how much you are loved and appreciated, how vital you are in God's kingdom, and that you are not alone in any of this journey of what it means to continue to be salt and light. And so if you have questions, reach out to me, reach out to your consultants. We hope that you'll say yes, and so that we can build our cohorts around that. And Ken, you can unmute. I was going to call on Ken Whitehurst to say any encouragement and also to close in prayer. So just a reminder, December 15th is the deadline for the letter of intent, and any way that we can offer you support or answer any question, no matter how big or small, we are here. I want to say thanks to everyone who led today. Thank you, Tom and Carlton and Marla and Katie and Russ and Miranda for working those slides, and Chip for fielding questions and letting people in the room, and for our staff who is always here to support. So Ken, if you could give us a little encouragement and pray us out, that would be great.
Thank you, Aisha, and thank you everyone for this wonderful, wonderful opportunity for the Vital Congregation Initiative. We want to thank all of those who have worked so diligently here and in other presbyteries across the country and in Louisville for the good work. And now that we can bring this to the Presbytery of Atlanta and to serve the churches here, the congregation. So just looking forward to everyone signing up and becoming involved in this very vital initiative. And so now let us go to God in prayer. Let us pray. God, we want to thank you for being with us throughout this meeting. Your presence has been in this place from the start to the end, and we want to say thank you, Lord. As we leave this meeting, let us go out there and be the salt and light of the earth. May we put into practice what we have discussed and learned, and we ask that you will bless those congregations who will participate, who will sign up, and who will do even more to help to spread the gospel of the good news of Jesus Christ through the world. Lord, we ask all of these blessings in the name of him who is able to save us and to redeem us. In Jesus' name we believe and pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of the week. Take care. Thank you.